When you think of India, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's just the sheer number of people. But that number, man, it tells an incredible story, full of complexity, full of dynamism. So if you really want to understand where India is heading, you got to start with its people. And it all begins with one single, game-changing number.
Just look at that, 1.3 billion. That's more people than North and South America combined. It means that right now, 1 out of every 6 people on this entire planet lives in India. That's not just a statistic, that's a demographic powerhouse, and its future is absolutely going to shape our own. So what does a number that big actually mean for a country? I mean, is it an engine for incredible growth, or is it a crushing weight, a source of unbelievable strength, or a massive, massive challenge? Well, as we're going to find out, the answer to all of that is a fascinating yes.
All right, so before we jump into the really big debates, let's just get a quick lay of the land, What are the key things that define this nation of over 1 billion people?
Okay, let's break this down. First off, yeah, it's the world's second biggest population, but it's also one of the youngest. Just think about all that energy, all that potential. At the same time, the growth rate is actually slowing down. But the thing is, the base is so huge that India still adds the entire population of Australia every couple of years. It's wild. And to top it all off, people are living longer, healthier lives, which is a fantastic sign of progress. It's this mix, youth, massive scale, and rapid change, that makes India's story so unique.
But, when you look closer at those billion-plus people, some really startling imbalances start to pop out. And one of the most significant, one with really profound consequences for the country, is the gender gap.
And the key to understanding this whole thing is a simple measurement called the sex ratio. It sounds technical, but it's not. It just asks a really simple question. For every 1,000 men and boys in the country, how many women and girls are there? It's a number that tells you a whole lot.
And in India, that number is 940. So for every 1,000 males, there are only 940 females. That's a gap of 60. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but this isn't just some statistical quirk. When you scale that across the entire population, you're talking about a gap of tens of millions of missing women and girls.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because on a chart like this, you can actually see the imbalance. This is a population pyramid. The left side is males, the right is females. Now look down at the bottom, at the youngest age groups. See how that blue area on the left is just a little bit wider? That's the male surplus. It shows you, plain as day, that this imbalance starts from the very beginning, at birth.
So why is this happening? Well, the causes are really complex, and they're woven deep into the social fabric. There's this long-standing cultural preference for sons, which is tied to things like inheritance and carrying on the family name. And tragically, this preference can lead to the absolute worst outcomes, from sex-selective abortions to girls getting less food, less health care, and less education than their brothers.
The good news, though, is that this is being tackled head-on. The Indian government has this huge initiative called Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, which literally means save the girl child, educate the girl child. It's a massive campaign that's all about changing those deep-seated cultural attitudes. Because, changing laws is one thing, but changing minds, that's the real challenge.
Okay, so while all of that's going on, there's another epic transformation reshaping India. We're talking about one of the largest human migrations in all of history, and it's happening right now, from the village to the megacity.
But first, you have to get this. Even with its giant, booming cities like Mumbai and Delhi, India's heart is still in its villages. We're talking nearly 3 out of every 4 people living in a rural area. And that's the starting point for this massive wave of urbanization that we're seeing today.
So what's the powerful magnet pulling millions of people toward the cities? Well, it's pretty much what you'd expect. It's that universal search for a better life. For jobs, for better schools, for better healthcare, and for that simple hope that your kids' lives can be better than yours.
But here's the catch. This move involves a major trade-off. People leave behind the challenges of rural life, like not having a lot of job options or good services, only to run smack into a whole new set of urban problems. Think overcrowded housing, nightmarish traffic, pollution, and just immense pressure on basic resources. It's kind of like trading one set of problems for another.
So all of this, the scale, the youth, the imbalances, the migration, it all leads to the single biggest question when we talk about India's demography. Is this massive population a burden that's holding the country back? Or is it its greatest advantage?
Let's just put it out there, plain and simple. Is having 1.3 billion people a crippling burden, or is it actually India's greatest asset? There are really compelling arguments on both sides of this. So let's look at the two sides of this coin. On the one hand, you've got the burden argument. 1 billion plus people put an incredible strain on water, on land, on infrastructure, on the job market, you name it. But then you flip the coin, and you've got the boon argument. A gigantic pool of human talent, a massive consumer market that can drive the economy, and this incredible potential for something called the demographic dividend.
So let's zoom in on that idea, that demographic dividend. Because honestly, how India handles this one thing is pretty much going to define its entire future. So what exactly is this demographic dividend? Well, put simply, it's a window of opportunity. It's that sweet spot in a country's history when you have a huge number of working-age people and relatively fewer dependents, so fewer kids and fewer elderly folks for them to support. If you play your cards right, this can create an absolutely massive economic boost. But, and this is a huge but, this dividend doesn't just happen automatically. Nope, you have to earn it. To cash in, you need massive investment in quality education and job skills. You need to create millions and millions of good jobs. And you have to make sure that the benefits of all that growth actually reach everybody. Because if you don't do that, that huge young population can go from being an engine of growth to a source of major social instability.
And that leaves us with this final, monumental question. The potential is just undeniable, a young, huge, ambitious population. But can India actually turn all of that incredible potential into real prosperity? Answering that question, well, that's not just a challenge for one nation. It's one of the defining stories of our time.